Welcome to another episode of the School Podcast. Today we have the amazing Tom Hague. But before we get into it, we have to thank our sponsors, Nisai Learning. Nisai are the #1 online school in the UK and maybe the world. I don't know. All I know is they've been dominating the game for the last 30 years. Check them out. Links are in the description. Tom, thank you for coming to Bristol. How are we, my friend?
Very good, my friend. Yeah, thank you. You say Bristol, almost like home for me. I'm a Devon boy at heart, as you know.
Oh, you are? Yeah, okay.
So coming south down that M5, done that a few times.
Wow.
And yeah, very much brought the weather with me back to my roots down here this morning.
That's amazing. Whereabouts in Devon?
So a place called Tiverton, which I always say, and everyone always goes, yeah, I know Tiverton.
Yeah.
Don't know why. I think it's because it's on the motorway.
It's the first kind of place
you kind of see it, don't you? Yeah, although I haven't, so my family still live there, so my parents still live there, my brother, my sister. But yeah, I moved away, 15 years ago.
Wow.
To Leicester. So Leicester's now my adopted home. As you know, and you know Leicester well yourself.
Yeah. So I'm sure Dave, who does all our unbelievable filming, Dave's also from Devon as well, but I love Devon. Too right. It's got like a nice feel to it, especially like Woolacombe and stuff. And we had a caravan there before, so
yeah.
Do you go there often?
Not as often as I should.
Yeah.
But people like make out it's a long trek, you know. But for us, as in me, my wife, my family, quite good at, even like when the kids were a couple of days old, we'd be in the car, 3-hour drive down to Devon.
Yeah.
So it's pretty commonplace for them. But no, not as often as we should. But take it for granted as well, because there's you saying, you know, Woolacombe and all these places by the coast. When you're growing up and every weekend you can go to the beach for a 3-day out, you take it for granted a little bit.
Comes like wallpaper, doesn't it?
Yeah, wallpaper.
Yeah, so you just, who said it? Miriam. She said like you just don't notice it anymore. Yeah, so like the same as like the view. When we first moved in here, it's like the view is amazing. Wow. Yeah. Now you barely even look at it, right? Yeah, so it becomes your new norm.
Beautiful place, special place.
So let's talk a little bit. So we worked out that I probably first met you 12 years ago?
We reckon, don't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and you brought me in, or an organisation brought me in, I think maybe, for the typical back then, the year 11 kind of motivational talk. And it was still pretty early in my journey. I wasn't on the road every day. And then we've always stayed in touch. Obviously, it came to a point now I'm just too expensive. Do you know what I mean,
Mate,
Tom?
What can you do?
Do you know what I mean? What can you do? But then you've changed roles, and you've taken and worked in a school, and you're like, I think, Cam, you're going to be perfect for this school. So over the last kind of 12 months or so, we've really touched base again a lot and really had a lot of conversations. However, we've always kept communication, but I've always watched and observed your story, your journey, and I feel like you've always had like a bit of a way about yourself. Quickly though, just for everyone at home listening, school teachers, leaders, in short as possible, what is like your kind of journey into education and to where you are now?
So short as possible, but we're going back to the ends, back to the roots. So yeah, growing up in Devon. Went to university in Durham, so if you can do your geography, it's quite far away. Didn't know where it was at the time. My dad, parents hadn't been to uni, but my dad had it in his head that there was a good place to go. So right, okay, you're off to basically, you know, Newcastle, up in the north, and decided to train to be a teacher, and got placed in Leicester. Never stepped foot in Leicester before in my life, but what would I have been? 22 years old, turn up there. Living with two guys who I'd only known for a couple of weeks. Sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? But that was what I was doing at the time in terms of the course I was doing, and got posted in this school to be a maths teacher, and that was back in 2010. So an unqualified teacher for a couple of years, and that's where we say 12 years, around that kind of time. That's where I crossed paths for yourself, Cam. Obviously, we were able to get you in, work year 11. So started there 2010. 8 years later, left there as the vice principal. And was fortunate in that kind of time, 2018, 2019, that I saw an advert to be the founding head teacher of a brand new school that was opening in Leicester. So brand new secondary school that my current trust had won the bid to be able to open, and that's something that hadn't happened in Leicester before, and was really fortunate to be the first employee in 2019.
Wow.
5 years later, left there, having been the head for 5 years, 1,200 kids, 150 staff, and that kind of coincided with what I do now. So I'm a director of education for our trust, the Media Educational Trust. We've got 15 schools, but I coincide that at the moment with being exec head of one of our secondary schools in particular, and that's where we've come back in touch.
Yeah.
Because I know you say like you've kind of like seen what I've been up to. I've been seeing what you've been up to as well, and it's like it's cool, isn't it, in terms of how our paths have been able to cross again. And you've been in working with our Year 10s, Year 11s, you and your team in the last, 18 months?
But also, I guess, what just growth looks like, isn't it? And
it's
always interesting. I think when I first came to your school all those years ago, we were very similar philosophies in many ways, and we thought quite similar. And just watching your journey and your growth has been amazing. Quickly, you said you went to uni in Durham, but then you got placed in Leicester.
Yeah.
Is that common for teachers?
Not necessarily. So there's different schemes in there, and there's different routes.
Okay, cool.
So the one I did in particular, I went through the Teach First training provider, and I was thinking that I was going to move to London, because that's what everyone wants to do at that age, right? So you're at uni, everyone's moving to London. But I had to, on the day I was being recruited into this scheme, you got pushed into the corner of the room at lunchtime, sat with a computer, and it said, right, pick what location you're going to be on. You got about 2 minutes. So click London, second clicked East Midlands, because in my head, out of all the regions, that was closest to Devon, even though it wasn't particularly close. And that kind of sliding doors moment was really pivotal in terms of like, here I am now, 15 years later, married, 4 kids, and the rest is history. Got placed into Leicester, but like I said, never stepped foot in the place in my life. Lived in a house which was, not the best place I've ever lived, I'll be honest. My mum came to visit at one point and basically left in tears because she couldn't believe her boy was living in this place. It was famous because we have this brilliant fish and chip shop at the end of the road, but that was pretty much all we had going for it. But hey, we've got to start somewhere, and you kind of move from there, don't we? And like you say, like similar philosophies in terms of like, when we met that time ago, it was just a case of getting on with it and taking the opportunities that were given your way and going from there. And that idea of, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? You know what I mean? And just like roll with it and just keep growing with it and take everything that comes your way.
That doesn't just happen, though. So have you always been like ambitious and wanted to work up through teaching?
Yeah.
Or was it you started teaching, you liked it, you enjoyed it, it was more like, oh, okay, cool, I can do this. And then you developed the passion. Or was that always a natural thing? Has Tom always been ambitious, always going after it, always wants?
I think like, so when I was, what would I have been at the time? 22 or so. So I'm 38 now. So if you go back to then, at that point, did I think, right, one day I want to be a head teacher, one day I want to be doing what I'm doing now? No, but at the same time, like I said, that idea of just, going with it, seeing how high your ceiling is, I think that's really important to me. Not just in terms of like challenging yourself, but again, like if we're in this for the long game, like my wife's not going to let me retire anytime soon. You know what I mean? Like I've still got 20 years plus to go in this game. So am I going to settle for where I was at any point? Then no. I think also like my strengths from a leadership perspective suit the kind of higher I've gone in terms of responsibility. I think I'm probably one of those people that brings the best out of those around me. I imagine you're quite similar in terms of the work that I've seen you do. And therefore, the greater responsibility and influence that's been given gives you a chance to, have a wider reach in that sense. So, look, I think it's changed over the years as well. I think if I was to go back and people that maybe worked with me, 15 years ago or whatever it might be, when you're 25 and you get made an assistant head of a school, and you're one of the, 10 most senior people in an organisation of 200 people or whatever it might be, and you're working with people that are older than my parents at that time, and you're in charge of them and you're responsible for them, there's a bit of ego to it, and you think that you know best, but I think that's really mellowed, and I'm really, really glad that it has over the years. Maybe people would not necessarily agree, but I think I felt it at the time, and ultimately, it's something that I've just had to learn and adapt to. And I'm in a place now where hopefully I can help shape other people's progression in that way as well.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you've gone through that journey of being an assistant head at 25 and then saying you're, I guess, one of the seniors out of 200 staff.
Yeah.
How did that affect you? How did you adapt into that role? How did you start to learn to communicate in a different way, but also being authentic, but also getting your point across? Because some of them, I guess, would have still known you as the 22-year-old Tom. Well, who does Tom think he is? Yeah, you can't tell me to do anything. How do you balance that approach at that time for you?
So I remember at that time, it was good for my development. The head decided that I was going to line manage this lady who turned out to be a colleague for years to come, who was head of Key Stage 4. She'd been at the school for, it's not disrespectful to say decades. And he said, right, you're going to be her line manager. But she was like one of the absolute cornerstones of this school and was really, really impressive in terms of what she did. And he actually said like, take her out for lunch, get to know her or whatever. And I was so out of my comfort zone. I didn't do that because that was like really daunting to think that I had to do something like that. But at the same time, it's about respect. It's about listening. And I think I got that wrong a few years before. If I digress to say, like, when I was young and naive and putting all the hours in as much as I still do now, it would really wind me up when teachers would be at the door at 3 o'clock. I thought, how can that be the case? Here's me going, trying to get everything done that I need to get done. Like, really, like, are they of the same level of commitment and ambition? How wrong was I? It was about respecting that people go about it in different ways. It was respecting that people have different skill sets, different knowledge bases, and ultimately trying to learn from them and take the best from them. So
different goals.
Yeah, different goals, but also like different things that they bring to the party. And I think that like diversity of thought ultimately is what it's all about, isn't it? And if we're trying to collectively bring something together, we joked earlier about the books that you've got here, but that idea of that ultimately the hedge fund does better than the individual stockbroker. Like that's proven to be the case.
Wow.
And ultimately, when you're working with people therefore that have got greater experience than you, like you've got to respect that. So going back to what you said in terms of like how did you therefore go about line managing people and taking the best from these people? Well, yeah, respecting it, but at the same time, thinking that you've been given this role because you need to listen to people's opinions, but then you need to make the call on stuff, you need to make the decision, and just doing that, all things considered, and taking as much information as you can to put it all together means that ultimately, yeah, going back to that diversity of thought idea, we make better decisions in that way.
NISI brings the classroom to you, delivering high-quality live education for learners who need a different approach, whether fully remote or through our hybrid zones within schools, providing accredited teacher-led sessions no matter where you are. As a DFE Section 41 approved provider, NISI is trusted by schools and local authorities to support learners nationwide. Visit nisi.com to learn more.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating as well, and I think that does come with time. So when I first started doing what I was doing, I was that person posting on Instagram saying, up at 4 a.m, where's the competition at? Yeah. And
this is me.
And you'd be in the gym at that time and there'd be 35, 38-year-olds. And I'd be like, come on, I feel like if you worked a little bit harder in the gym, you could do this and do that. And but then they'd be like, you have no idea. And then eventually you become that person and you do start to learn, like, everybody can have a goal, everybody can have a dream, but it's also not everyone's dream is to make it big and be a leader and be a CEO of a trust or go and run their own business. And it's about being okay with that, because you still need people to work in the kitchens or whatever it is. And it's about understanding that everyone's not the same. We all got different morals, different values, etc., etc. And I guess it's about bringing the best out in people, isn't it?
It's bringing the best out of people, but also I think that ultimately you don't know what's people's backstory is, don't know what's going on with people, You don't know in terms of the fact that, you know, they might be at the absolute pinnacle of where they want to get to in that point, and that's okay. And also, like, you know, we're talking about career here, aren't we? Your preferences, your priorities do change. I think I'm at a point in my life where, you know, it's underpinned by wanting to be a better man, to be honest, but it's about wanting to be a better dad, better husband, and I suppose I've always got that bit though, the competing priority, want to be a better at my job, you know, and a better leader. And for different people, those things come in different orders. And at different times in our life, those things come in different orders. Like day by day, they can come in a different order as well, can't they? So I think it's respecting that and thinking that ultimately, yeah, like our view is not the one view. It's important to, you know, I think we learn that over time.
What did you used to teach?
What do you think? What do I look like?
Music teacher.
People go history, which is a bit harsh, isn't it? I think it's the Greys. Let's be honest. They go, you know, history, maths.
Maths. Okay, got it.
You say used to? I still teach.
How much? Yeah, how many hours do you teach?
Twice a week.
Twice a week.
Token gesture. First lesson Monday, last lesson Friday.
Oh.
Which is like brilliant. Like, talk about bookend your week.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's because we've got some part-time staff that I work around them. But don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, year 8, locked in. First thing Monday morning, last thing Friday afternoon. I think some of them, like, you know, blink on a Friday afternoon, and then all of a sudden they're back there again Monday morning. Wow. To be honest. And yeah, it's good. I'm sharing the class with a lady who's doing phenomenally well, but she's back where I was 16 years ago, if you see what I mean. So that keeps me on point and making sure.
So do you teach because you want to or because you have to? Or depends?
I think I've always taught. Maybe bar last year where I was a little bit out of school.
Yeah.
But in that time I always have. Look, it's one of those where you've got to make a decision because is it the best use of resource in the school? And this is something I think about all the time for you know, the head, let's say, to be teaching. However, I think that's like a personal pride thing a little bit.
Yeah.
Where if I've been a part of the school that I am now for about a year, I feel like I need to kind of muck in a little bit and show my worth. I'm only actually in the school as exec head 4 days a week. And I think about my, you know what it's like in teaching, you get your, you know, it's all compartmentalized, you've got your slots. So my 25 slots in that week or whatever it might be, yeah, I'm either in the classroom or I'm on call or I'm in the internal exclusion room, probably about 2 out of my 4 days, which is not necessarily, you could argue, the best use of my time, but I think it's really important to model it. I think it's really important to show up.
Yep.
And I don't like the idea of people having to pick up my tab in that way. And I think it's important to do it. So, yeah, more a case of wanting to do it probably than necessity.
Because sometimes, and we've had other guests say certain things, whether it's accurate or not, but sometimes executive principals can get a lot of criticism, right? For not really being in the schools, from working from a kitchen table. Why is it important for you to be active in the schools? And I'm saying that not because you're telling me, I know that because I see it. Yeah. So I've been there, you know, so why is that important to you? And why do you think exec heads get criticism? And do they deserve it, some of them?
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. So why do I think it's important to me? Honestly, because I think it's about being part of that team.
Yeah. And
only wanting to expect and ask people to do things that you would do yourself. And I've heard different ways, right? I've heard exec heads, to use your example, say, you know, you won't see me on break duty because that's not my job. That's not what I'm here to do. Technically, if you go back to what my remit is standards and curriculum in the school, staffing, budget, we could say, and moving those things forward. And a big emphasis for us is on attendance, as it is with every school at the moment. I could say that's just my job lot, and anything outside of those lanes, I'm not going to touch. And maybe we'll come back to this later. And I like the idea of wanting to prioritise, you know, those things on your diary. But at the same time, I just think that if you're going to be there 8 o'clock every morning, having the senior team around the table and saying, right, what have we got coming up today? I'll pick up this, I'll pick up that. Remember guys, I'm in, we call it IE, internal exclusion period 1, I'm on call period 2. That's got to be more authentic from a leadership perspective, rather than just saying, right, I'm out of here, or whatever it might be, or I'm not there. And you know what? I'll be honest with you, Cameron. Like, I'm meant to be there 4 days a week, right? So Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They're my lots. I've got other responsibilities.
I seen you there on Tuesday though. What's going on?
Clocked back in on Tuesday in the afternoon. I wasn't there all day, you know that. But I've got other responsibilities. I probably only average 3.5 days a week, 3.5 days a week. But I do feel a little guilt around that. And that's, I think, the team's understanding of it. I think they know that I've got a bigger remit than that. But ultimately, I just don't want for people to have to, compensate for me not being present.
Got you.
I think is the way I'd best describe it.
But all those things you just spoke about, even like attendance and stuff, attendance can improve maybe from you being there at lunchtime and having a conversation with the kid. What's going on? What's happening?
Yeah. The counter argument, isn't it, is like, could someone else be doing that? But yeah, ultimately, like I got asked when I started in this role as an exec head at the school that I'm working at the moment, where you were with us this week, and a colleague I'd worked with before said, right, what's the plan? Is it that you've got like this big X Factor plan that's going to revolutionise this school? No, and that's not like what I would want it to be anyway. I think that's not the way that I want to go about it. Or is it more that, just Tom being there, making good decisions every day will ultimately improve this school? And it's more of that. And therefore, that's the caveat to it, isn't it? Is being there. And like I said, I'm still not there as much as I would want to be, because I'm kind of pulled away from it. But I promise you, every waking hour I'm thinking about it. Like I said, half my week therefore is to, be on the ground and be about that school and have staff bringing stuff to me and trying to, help solve the problems that we've got coming up at any one moment. But at the same time, you know what it's like as well. It's the bits that come when people don't see, isn't it? It's the after school, it's when you put your kids to bed, it's into the evening, it's the weekend, it's the holidays, it's half term, and my wife's saying to me like, oh Tom, I'm taking the kids out on Wednesday so you can work. Like, that's our pattern. And we know that, and we make it work, don't get me wrong, and it's brilliant. But at the same time, it's, that's the bit on the ground, you can do that because of everything that comes around it that people don't see.
Got you.
And that's a big part of it.
Do you have any teaching philosophy, or did you have any teaching philosophy you lived and died by? So back from when you were 22 to 30, and you're like, this works. I know it works. I've proved it works. And now you're 38, executive head, a lot more experience. You look back and say, why did I do that? That was
the wrong way around. So I think there's a particular lesson that I can remember, going back a decade or whatever it might be, year 9. I'm gonna say some first names of some lads that are now, well into their 20s or whatever. I had Hanad and Cosmos, and it was quite a low set in year 9. But sometimes you just find a class that you just absolutely just at one with and you just love. Excuse me. And we were doing something where there was, it was a maths lesson, and it wasn't my forte, but there was a lot of cutting and sticking going on in this class, right? There was glue sticks everywhere, paper everywhere, trying to do something with nets or shapes or whatever it might be. And I kept persevering in this lesson that all of a sudden this was a good idea to do. And they completely did not know what was going on, right? To the point where, I'm gonna be honest, I got a bit frustrated in that class and I kicked the bin over, right? Little waste paper bin, which was full of all this like paper cuttings or whatever. Kids didn't have a clue what was going on. Kick the bin over. And I remember
as you were teaching,
as I was teaching mid-class, and they were like, we got on well. They're like, so what are you doing? But like philosophically, that was completely at odds to what I wanted to do. And I think that that idea of just discovery, I suppose, and like, is that the most direct route to getting kids to be able to learn, I don't know, whatever it was, area or shape that I wanted to do. I don't know why I did it at the time, but probably because it was the latest fad or whatever it might be. But it was completely at odds to my philosophy, I suppose. And I didn't realise what my philosophy was. I just almost like found it by chance, probably because the way I was taught when I grew up. And I was fortunate, back in the day to have like almost an opportunity to find my own like style, find my own stance. And ultimately it was about, giving kids the most like clear, direct route to learn their maths. And it somehow worked. And we were really successful at that time, to the point where, it was really impactful, and the kids learnt a lot, so it was good.
Fascinating. Do you believe in the whole idea of sets and having settings? And because you've worked in a mixture of schools, from start-up schools, from the school that I first met you in to obviously the school that you're in now. I don't even know actually if you guys do sets.
So I think it's changed over the years, my thinking on this.
And has it gone back? It
goes both ways, different per subject, I would say, as well. So it was always, again, like you just like land, don't you, in a space, and you're in your environment, and what's done is, all of a sudden the way that you're then taught to do it. And that was around, students being in sets, and I do that because like 2 bands as well. And that was all around the fact that when I started out as a teacher, I'd teach year 11 like only quite early in my career. And over the course of the year, we'd have about 4 classes. So kids would come, they would pass their exam, they would move to someone else, I'd get the next. It was like conveyor belt, and that was the style of schools at the time, unfortunately. And that therefore had to be about sets. That was about kids getting grade C's or grade 5s or whatever it might be, which was important for them. And then, was head of the new school, cheers, thank you, head of the new school, Castlemead, and therefore did the same. So that was my philosophy, that's how I've been taught, we did the same. And then COVID hit, and we come back into school, go into bubbles or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden you couldn't be in a different set for maths and English and science, right? So some kids are better at one than the other. So you could be in set 1 for one and set 3 for another. Couldn't do that from a COVID perspective because you had to stay in your bubble. So all of a sudden we saw this idea of not having like strict sets, and it worked really nicely in some subjects. So the English team, even since then, love it, and I can see why, because this idea of, if from a kind of literary perspective, or in terms of oracy perspective, if you've got kids that are ultimately with their peers who are also struggling in that way, they're weaker readers, or they're weaker in terms of their ways in which they can articulate themselves, they've not got good models then to learn from. Mixing the students up in that way is a bit harder to teach, because all of a sudden you've got children of different abilities, and you need to be able to challenge and stretch them all. But the children that are a bit weaker in that sense and got more to develop have all of a sudden got brilliant models in their classroom. So got to a kind of hybrid approach, as you might expect, and that's what happens over the years, isn't it? You tailor your approach, and you kind of get these hybrids where all of a sudden certain subjects, we're at a point now where maths, science, we do set. We've got tiers of entry, for example, in maths, whatever it might be. But then in the more kind of humanities subjects, in English, that idea of being able to, use your voice really well, but having that in a more mixed group means that, we can have a greater proportionate effect on those children that need the greatest gains.
What's the argument? What is the benefit of sets? In education, what do people say? The benefits of sets are what?
It's easier. It's easier for a teacher. You've got a narrower bandwidth in terms of children's abilities, so you can therefore pitch to them in that way. Counter argument being that technically for children that are higher ability, being in a mixed ability set really doesn't affect them, because they're higher ability anyway, they're doing well, they're going to attain well. For children that are less able, if that's the right terminology, being in a mixed ability set has a disproportionately positive impact on them. So therefore, if you're not affecting higher ability children, but you're having a positive impact, somewhat, but it's controversial because here we are, like teaching's been around for time, right? And we're still debating this stuff. Then the research would suggest that ultimately sets are not the be all and end all. and hence we end up with these hybrids. And
it's interesting.
It's philosophical. It's what you believe
and
in.
It's learning, and maybe every school's different. I don't know. It's
context.
Because as you're fully aware, obviously I work with pretty challenging students.
Yeah.
So a student might be in a mixed ability set.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I talk about it a lot, the 3 psychological needs for like internal motivation, competence, relatedness, and autonomy.
Yeah.
Competence, right? If a student doesn't feel like he can or she can access the work, then that could result in obviously underachieving or going completely the other way, behaviour,
of course,
acting up, poor attendance.
Yeah.
So then how do you close that gap?
Yeah.
So a couple things, obviously that example, then I guess mixed ability groups also closes the attainment gap. Is that, I don't know if the data proves that, but is that the theory of?
But I think in both examples you give there, like how do you, in any class arrangement, how do you ensure that children are at a point where they're able to learn, participate in the lesson, progress, or attainment gap, whatever it might be, put all the research around setting to one side, or all these different mechanisms that mean that we do well and we're more effective. It's the skill of the teacher that trumps it all.
Wow.
Well, it is though, isn't it? And you know that from your experience. You've got kids, like you know how that works. It's the skill of the teacher that trumps it all. It's the teacher's effectiveness that has the greatest impact in terms of closing that gap. So then how does that affect someone such as myself in my role? Ultimately, does leadership trump that even more? Probably. Because in my role, it's about providing the environment, facilitating opportunity for teachers, therefore, to be at their best. And then that's how I'm going to impact the classrooms in our trust and across our schools.
Wow, that's really strong, to be fair. Because you could really go into that argument, can't you? But when you just say, do you know what, like the teacher does trump it all.
Yeah, and I think like, how do we get better teachers? Yeah, environment, looking after them, the conditions, the culture of the school, professional learning, whatever it might be. They're the things we've got to try and invest our time in. But as a head teacher, exec head, I'm going to make it up, but there's like a stat that's banded around this idea that, you know, what proportion of your week do you spend on like teaching and learning in the classroom? Less than 10%, like easily, because it's the stuff that goes around that. But if you can take the cognitive load off teachers, if you can clear the way for teachers to teach, hopefully students can learn better at that point.
And how many teachers truly try and develop and actually improve and try and become better teachers? Because sometimes I feel like when you focus on becoming better at something, naturally the motivation will follow. And I've gone into this route, you know, I'm technically not a teacher, but I've in classrooms 4 out of 5 days a week. But I'm more of a professional driver, if I'm honest. But I rarely do just one-off stuff now, as you know, even with your school, I'm in 6 days. But it probably hit a point maybe 2 years ago, if I'm honest, and I felt like I was just going from school to school. I was delivering to a high standard. I was stagnant. No, I wasn't growing. I felt like I wasn't getting better. I was just ticking a box. The same schools then would bring me back the next year, and you're just kind of in this whole cycle. But I would say, especially over the last kind of year, even I've just over-delivered or really just worked on my craft and just really actually diving in a little bit deeper to the students and their problems and challenges. And my motivation now is like I've kind of got what I was, say, 10 years ago, but a bit more. So for example, just your school the other day, I had one-to-ones with some of the students on the power program, and you'll see the notes when I send them over. It was all about action. It was we've gone through it. I know the background of the student. I know where we're at, and there's compassion, but then it's like, where's the action at? What can we do? And how can I help you? And we get onto that level. Like one of them wanted to be like a football coach, and he's already refereeing on the weekend. And I said, have you considered like maybe, when you're I think he's 16, going on LinkedIn. I said, what's LinkedIn?
Yeah.
I said, give me a professional football team. Unfortunately, it was Leicester, right? I said, look, type in Leicester on LinkedIn. What pops up? Academy coach, under 12s coach, all of these. And I said, you've got this network. I said, people want to help a 16-year-old. People don't want to help a 34-year-old bold guy who wants to get into football coaching. I said, this is your opportunity, and how can we put these things in place? So we set goals, a bit of a strategy, and they go out clear. And I'm really, now I've got the bug again, and I feel like when you learn and you grow and you read books, Tom, you read books,
so you say,
you get that hunger again, and you can really start to see like you're making a difference. So that's just what I've been picking up, I think. And it's good to go back and remind yourself kind of why you're doing stuff. So back to like teaching and learning, Bill, is that quite difficult to instill what I've just kind of spoke into teachers, or teachers who want to get better, the 24-year-old Tom who wants to progress through teaching? Like, but then you've also got, people got different priorities, as we've already said.
So I think it's twofold. So like the most prominent research that like sticks in my head, and I can't pretend to be an absolute geek in terms of this stuff, Cam, I'll be honest. But there's a bit by Dylan William that this idea that teachers, improve proportionately quickly at the first part of their career, and after 3 to 4 years it tails off effectively. Apart from in schools that have got high performing cultures, and all of a sudden that trend, that bend continues in an upward trajectory.
Wow.
So going back to what I said, if teachers have the greatest impact on the learning, and hence ultimately the chance, to give children better choices in the future, from my perspective, is about the conditions to allow teachers to keep on that trajectory of wanting to improve all the time. And how do we go about that? I think it is about stripping back from teachers, the noise that goes on around teaching, the bureaucracy that goes on around teaching as much as we can, but also giving them space to practice and rehearse this stuff. You'll have read from Matthew Saiz there, for example, this idea of the fact that black box thinking, and from an NHS perspective, wanting to learn and hone their craft all the time, or not so from their perspective, as opposed to thinking about what's in that black box, thinking from a teacher's perspective, what it is that makes the greatest difference, and really being poignant around real high leverage differences that we can make to teachers' practice, be it around questioning, be it around circulation around the classroom, being really quite forensic in quality assuring, what it is we need to be better, and responding to that rapidly. That's what you want to try and create, but it's tough.
You said practicing.
Deliberately practicing. So this is not like new from me in any stretch. Can't claim credit for this, but the idea that if you were to walk down to, or not walk down if you're injured, but if you were to need to get down to the hospital and you had a surgeon that was going to operate on you, you wouldn't want that to be the first time that they're playing around with that scalpel or whatever it might be. So if children have only got one chance in our classrooms, ultimately teachers need to get that right. So in our professional learning, and you'll see this in schools up and down the country, we want teachers to be deliberately practicing this stuff. So we ran the latest professional learning session where we've changed the way in which our teachers are rewarding students in class, and making that really codified in terms of our approach and what we want to see. So it's really consistent across our school. And in that hour session, it was on a Monday, after school on a Monday, teachers would sit around the table like this with 3 or 4 colleagues, and they would pretend to be the students in their class, and the teacher would have to put themselves out of their comfort zone and stand up and practice that. And that's what a surgeon would do. That's what a trainee pilot would do before they end up with 200 kids on their Boeing 747 or whatever it might be. Because you can't put it to chance in that way, because kids haven't got time for us to chance it. They only get one shot at this stuff. And it's important therefore that we are in a profession, and we see it as practice in terms of deliberately so, but also like this is teaching as an art form. Like this is our day-to-day practice, so we need to want to keep getting better at it as well. Flummoxed you there, aren't I?
No,
I'm still thinking about the thing that you thought I was a music teacher, to be honest.
I was only trying to insult you, I'm joking. Okay. But even though I would rather be the music teacher,
I took it that way,
but I don't want to role play. It's embarrassing to do this, Tom.
Yeah.
Why am I going to do this? Why are we doing this? It's ridiculous. It doesn't work. How do you, that's culture, I guess.
Yeah. Which is like the buzzword and easily said, right? Yep.
How do you combat that?
Yeah. And I'm conscious as well, like going back to that that stage thing. So take the school that I'm a part of now, that I think has had 7 head teachers in 7 years, or whatever it might be.
Wow.
Commonplace, isn't it? You know, not trying to make out it's
we had Sam Seedy from a school in Bradford. He was the 21st teacher, 21 teacher, about 20 or something. It was crazy.
Yeah, and therefore turning up with this new fad. It's like, who's this guy? He's not going to be here very long anyway. He's from the trust or whatever it might be. You have to, and again, it's buzzwordy, but you have to take people with you. You have to do it incrementally. You have to get over the idea that, you know what, guys, this is going to be a bit awkward to start with, but we're doing it for this reason. I'm really trying to sell the why behind this stuff, and not getting bogged down in research papers from America from 25 years ago or whatever it might be. Like, this is proven to work. Other schools locally to us do this stuff. Look at the difference they've made. Let's go with it. Let's do it together. Let's start small. Let's model it. And ultimately, I think that teaching's a tough profession. There are other tough ones out there. I'll give you that caveat. It's a tough profession. Like it's 22 lessons a week for most teachers, week after week for long careers. Like we said, there are very few. I can't think of more than 1 or 2 on my hand in the years that I've been doing this that don't want to be the best teacher they can. So ultimately, convincing people, and it's not even convincing, it's not that strong, showing people that this is where we're going to do it and we're going to do this collectively together, you have very little pushback.
Okay, so say pupil premium students, or even say, well, it could be SEND, for example. I'm assuming you make teachers aware of certain challenges and stuff like that. Yeah, okay. So being a leader also of staff, because that's what you are, do you also then have to learn about the staff?
Yeah.
So Steve got a divorce last year, and balancing that, which I can imagine is of course very difficult, right? But once again, getting the staff right and teaching and learning, if they're in there thriving, then the student's gonna thrive, but not always. I don't know. So what's your I don't really know what my question is, but as you were talking, it's just like, for me, we're always obviously talking about students. I'm all about the students, but I guess in your position, I don't have to necessarily worry about it unless obviously I've got a small team. Yeah. But do you take that into consideration, or the way I don't want to be political, the way the government, the pressure and the stress, can you just not really, you just got to get on with it type of thing? Yeah,
it's twofold, but again, my philosophy has probably changed. So I wonder, this idea, like chicken and egg, do you look after the staff so that the staff look after the students, or is everything about the students? But then if everyone's about the students, you need the staff, right? So which is it? And I think my philosophy has changed somewhat. In that I've learnt from our CEO, so my boss, Sarah, she's taught me in the last few years that when it comes to decision making, and the more senior we get and more responsible we get in our careers, you need to be able to come back to this, I feel. If you make your decisions with the best interest of students in mind at all the time, you effectively can't go wrong. And does that mean that there's a conflict between staff and students? No, in terms of your decision making, no, not necessarily. But we do what's best for students. So your example there of like knowing what's going on in people's lives and stuff, that psychological safety for staff is clearly like the greatest thing. I said about facilitating the environment for people to do their best work. That psychological safety is important, but at the same time, like going back to what I said earlier, if these children have got one shot at this to get it right and to be able to move them forward, like I'm paid we said it earlier, I'm paid to be honest. Like that's my job, and therefore ultimately I'll make decisions around staff needing to improve and staff needing to continue to hone their craft and do that well, because ultimately it lands for the students then. And sometimes that means that we've got to do difficult work at the same time, and sometimes, Cameron, that doesn't make you the most popular person in the building, but if you've done the stuff around it where ultimately you're being able to show your philosophy, your morals, your values, hopefully you've got credit in the bank to know that people know that you're making the best decisions by the students in your care, and that's the job, and that's what we're paid to do.
With over 3 decades of experience, we specialise in supporting young people with special educational needs, attendance issues, and students at risk of exclusion, as well as elite athletes, performers, and families who travel and need continuity in their learning. We combine in-person mentoring and virtual learning with small class sizes, subject specialist teachers, strong pastoral care, and rigorous safeguarding to ensure NISI students feel safe, supported, and ready to learn. Visit nisi.com to learn more.
And most of the time, it's still going to be, I guess your decisions are going to be fair. So, like, when I've made mistakes with part-time jobs when I was younger, and if I ever got told off for something or I didn't do something right, I could probably say, they got a point. Yeah. I am taking the mick a little bit here. I am messing about a little bit too much in the kitchen, and most of the time they do have a point. But I guess just like some of our students, you say, you might remove them from your class, and they're like, what, I didn't do nothing. And you're like, well, you were, whatever the reason is. But I guess it's about taking responsibility to be able to move forward and progress. Next one, engaging parents. Has that particularly came easy for you? Is it tough? Do you have a philosophy? Obviously, there's a whole thing I hear often, which I always challenge, is let's talk about pupil premium parents. We can't engage them, they never come in. Yeah, what's your whole concept on parents? Is the parents' input as big of an impact as we think? Where's your head at?
So in my week, in my day-to-day work, when do I get in touch with parents? Normally when something's gone wrong, to be honest. Normally where we've got conflict, and we've got difference of perspective between a colleague of mine who's trying to go about doing their job and trying to hold students to account and obviously have their best interests at heart, but parents might have different perspective on it, if I'm honest. And that difference of perspective is just something I've come to learn and come to respect as well. The perspective on stuff is just like hugely important and hugely powerful. And I think as a leader, it's about trying to find the common ground between parents and what they want. And I was going to say 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, maybe more, parents just want the best for their child, of course, and they have got their child's best interests at heart, and that is always your starting point in terms of common ground. Because if you can get across that we're trying to look out for the best for your child, that's what you're doing as well. That's the starting point, and everything can kind of flow from there. And you know what? Ultimately, we can clash heads, and we can butt heads, and we can have a less common ground. But where does it get us? Sometimes you're working with parents and families who have got their child in year 7 or 8. They're going to be part of your school for the next 3.5, 4 years. So you've got to find that common ground quickly, and I think there's always a way to go about it.
Is there a quick fix to engage parents quickly?
Get them in
Yeah, quick.
Get them in like from the start. Your best attendance in schools that struggle with this stuff, your best attendance for parents is that year 6 induction evening. Because if your child who's 11 years old, your most precious commodity in your life, all of a sudden is going to big school, and you're going to find out about what's happening the next day on transition day, you'll come into that evening, right? So there's lots of fear, isn't there, around like customer engagement, if I can call it that, where if you have a real positive experience on that point, and when they first arrive, and that point where that last moment before they leave your building is really positive, and they feel part and greeted and welcome, that's your starting point, and then you go from there. And you know what, like, we've moved to different stuff. We had our second annual iftar meal this week, where we had the community into school, and we had 160 people sign up in a school of 1,000 children, and it was like no educational purpose whatsoever to that. It was just the fact of bringing our community in, coming together, having a meal together, having friendship. One of our year 10 boys leading prayer, and it was just a beautiful evening. Then next time we pick up the phone to parents because we've got something we need to resolve, surely we're in a better place. But that's not the panacea. That's not the answer necessarily, because look, this stuff's hard, and hey, if I had all the answers,
yeah, of course,
we wouldn't be sat here, would we? We'd be selling ourselves somewhere, I suppose, as well, because it's tough stuff.
You mentioned research quite a lot and data quite a lot. Do you know any data around like engaging parents? Not nothing exact, but like, is there any common kind of data which is thrown out there in education which people talk about, whether it's true or not? I don't know.
Don't know.
But the data says, oh, that's fine. When you say data, you mean ChatGPT?
Yeah. So like, nothing springs to mind. Maybe that's my naivety, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it's because I don't know that there are all the answers to how we go about this stuff. There's plenty, like we work with Impact Ed at the moment, where we like survey parents, etc., and it does attitudinal analysis in terms of like perceptions of school and stuff like that. And in our school that I'm working at the moment, the data is around like valuing education, right, which is a big thing to shift. And I can't treat all parents in our school, let alone the schools in our trust, or all schools generally, as a homogenous group in that way. But how do we get across to some families for which education wasn't a positive experience for them to be seen as, you know, a real important part from their child's perspective? And ultimately, I think it comes down to communication, the way in which we are positively framing stuff, the way in which we're, you know, not just getting in touch all the time when it's because your child's not attended or because they've missed their homework or whatever it might be. How can we positively, you know, outweigh from a ratio perspective to make sure that's right? But no, I think it's an untapped area. Maybe that's your next venture for you in the empire.
Yeah, to be fair, the reason why I asked that question is because my old head teacher, Peter Rowland, we're actually writing a book together about engaging parents and bringing everyone together. So it'd just be interesting to know your philosophy. But back to kind of like data and research as well. I think Amjad said it in one of our last podcasts. He said, I feel like he's very similar to you actually, and he says, you know, I think it's important to be data informed, but I'm not data led. And I think I like that. And he says sometimes when you look into the data and the research, you realise, oh, I'm doing that anyway.
But that's like that's one of the greatest challenges in school leadership, because these days with like the flow of information, social media, blogs, whatever it might be, it's very easy to learn on the surface what other schools are doing. So every school pretty much that I know of does the same stuff. They've got the same levers, same components, same mechanisms, and they feel that they do, we said earlier about practice, they do deliberate practice, they do coaching, they do start of the day meetings with their SLT. Everyone does the same stuff. So they feel like actually that inertia of like, how do we get better? Well, we're already doing it. What people don't realize, or maybe, you know, some people don't realize, is that the schools that are, you know, outperforming are doing this stuff on absolute stilts. They are doing it to the minutiae of detail, to the point where like no stone is unturned, and they are doing stuff to a level of detail that people don't appreciate. And we say from like a reading perspective, I'm reading this idea of like good to great at the moment by Jim Collins, and I'm only a little bit into it, but like he nails it in the first bit where he says like good is the greatest inhibitor to great, because schools get to a point where they progress, they get better, and they get their head above the parapet and they get out of the marshes, and all of a sudden they think like, we've arrived, this is us. But ultimately, like, you know, being good is the greatest inhibitor to being great as a school or as an organisation. So you can learn from others in terms of what they do, but how do you do it like bigger and better than anyone else? And I know you work with children from more disadvantaged backgrounds, and certain schools have got more complex cohorts of children. Like, you need to do it even better. You need to be beyond great to even achieve like good outcomes for these kids, and that's what it's all about. I forgot what your question was, but yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Got passionate about it.
ADHD over it, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So you talk also. Actually, I'm going to come to that question next. You say about you started a new school, right? From the beginning.
Yeah.
So like year 7.
Yeah. So first employee. Saw the advert, got the job, and that was in, let's say, the summer a year before the school opened. And we opened in a temporary site, which I knew that was going to be the case. So I don't think you ever came there. So we had 2.
No, you didn't invite me in to be fair.
You had to be careful. It was about reputation at that time. You had to be careful who we
I'm not going to go to a
random
random site.
This guy,
those toilets you get at the festivals.
It was on a car park, right? So it was. I'm not even joking. It was on a car park. So there was a car park that was rented by the DFE, and they brought in 2 big like mobile blocks on the back of a lorry, and that was us. And had to get, not just me, but we had to get 240 families, like I said earlier, to get their most precious commodity, their 11-year-old child, to not go to the school where they would normally go to, and bring them to a school that had no reputation, no staff,
no toilets.
Couldn't even tell them where the car park was because there was a legal.
Because you're in it,
right? Because we were like, this is us. I took the staff there for the first time and walked them down from the Holiday Inn, like no expense spared, like in terms of take them out for dinner. Walked them down from down the road and arrived at the edge of this car park and said, like, there was all these cars parked on it, obviously potholes everywhere. This is where we're going to be working, and they're all sitting there thinking, my God, have I signed my contract? Because I'm not sure this is where I want to be. Anyway, we and the chair of government at the time was a smart guy. Is a smart guy, and he said that, Tom, I don't think we should start with 240 families. Like, let's start small. Let's start with 100. Get 100 that are really invested and understand this. And I was like, no, that's not the brief we've been given, right? We're meant to be giving families of Leicester a different option to be able to send their children to school. And yeah, we got 240 children from the outset that came to us. Interestingly, it was about 2 miles down the road from the school where I'd been for 8 years and left as a vice principal. So it was like all of a sudden, like, big competitor in that sense. And what was really interesting is we had like children who started with us in year 7, and their older sibling went somewhere else. Like, we were splitting families in terms of where their children went to school, and that was a huge honour and a huge privilege. But we started with
what is a free school? What is a free school?
So a free school is this entity of opening a new school. It sounds completely different and out there, but once the school's open, as in once it becomes that first day, it's then legally an academy.
Okay.
But it's ways in which in different areas, different trusts or local authorities can open new schools, and that was us back in 2019.
Was it as easy to implement teaching and learning culture, everything we've discussed today, because you started from scratch?
It's got to be. And I think people that say otherwise, in my experience, aren't being truthful in that way. So if you look at the 6 schools in our trust, like I said, we've got 2 schools like that are both outstanding schools, incredibly oversubscribed. The second one's got year 11 for the first time this year. They're going to do really well. School I was at, some of the best results in the city last year. They're right up there. Now, and we talked about this recently with the senior team in which I work now, to change things are a lot more difficult because things are embedded, things are historic, things are habitual in schools that have been doing this longer. So yeah, I think it was hard work doing that startup because you can't assume anything. Like, you're at the point where, I don't know, you want to run a trip and you've not even got the trip form ever before. You know, it's down at that level. Everything has to be invented from the bottom up.
Okay.
But that's obviously a huge privilege. And yeah, from a culture perspective, there is no culture. So you're going to set it. And every organisation, right, has got a culture of some sort. So you have got a chance to be able to shape that in your own style. And you know what? We didn't get it all right by any stretch. But yeah, come the end of 5 years, it was time to move on from it because we'd done that first chapter of the school.
So I'm not looking for an opinion right now, but as you know, I had Catherine from Michaela on the podcast, and I asked a similar question, but I said, could you run your philosophy in a random school up in Middlesbrough?
Yeah.
I believe her answer was yes. But I said, what would you tackle first? And her response, if I remember correctly, otherwise it's going to be embarrassing, was uniform.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I believe she said she was going to tackle.
Yeah.
Is there depth into that? Or what would your philosophy be going from your school, your approach, building the culture, et cetera, to then going into, say, the schools that you are in now?
Yeah.
As an executive head, what is the first thing you tackle?
So I think it's around disruption in the classroom and eradicating that in the classroom. And I think that you can do bigger stuff around the school, and you can, you know, we've worked on corridors and conduct in that sense. But ultimately, again, like, even if this is going to take you a bit of time to get the school, you know, where you want it to be, and been part of School Map now for a year and worked with the team, and yeah, we think we're in a better place and better shape than we were a year ago. It's going to take a bit longer. However, we can't just always start back with year 7 again and say that, well, when they get to year 11, we'll be better, because you've got 4 year groups above them in that way. So you have to, like, in the short term, switch on and get those classroom conditions right from the outset. Can you just take that model, that free school model, and just drop it into a different school? I don't feel that you can overnight. I think that you can if you're satisfied that there's going to be a bit of fallout from that. But actually, if you're going to respect what's gone before, and the fact that, as we said about, you know, people are really absolutely trying to do the best job they can, then ultimately you need to do it with people and do it together. And I think ultimately that's gonna mean you need to evolve a little bit rather than have, like, just overnight revolution.
I like that a lot. And that was actually the point I was going to come back to. You can't just start at year 7.
Yeah.
Because you talk a lot about pace.
Yeah.
And speed.
Yeah.
And the students, you're there for them.
Yeah.
Why is pace important?
Because hopefully it's, like, come through in what I've said. That you can't, like, time waits for no man, but time doesn't wait for these kids. They don't necessarily know, and why should they? And there's different approaches in this, that they've got disadvantage to overcome. Yes, we want them to own it, and we want them to be able to go about it, but, like, look at the age that we are, if I can put us in the same bracket. Hey, almost.
You have turned into a bit of a silver fox the last couple of years, to be fair.
Hey, look, it's...
At least you got your hair.
You say last few years, I'll take that, thank you, because it's going back a while.
And it was, to be fair, recently in your school, I got abused for being bold. Remember that video I sent you?
We don't do abuse.
One of my favourite students, what was she saying? Oh, she's amazing, she is.
Yeah.
Boldy over there.
Yeah,
how does it feel like to have no hair?
Yeah.
All jokes aside, unbelievable student.
I taught her that as well.
Oh, so, did you?
Yeah. Yeah, bless her. She got 5 merits for that, so fair play.
Oh.
So like pace, like kids, they haven't, what can they do? You can't live your life backwards, can you? It'd be brilliant if we could. My stepson's 14, and, like, he's fortunate because he's got us on his case, right? But it's harsh, isn't it? That the choices, are not going to like determine where he goes in the future, but it's important. Like it opens up pathways, and it can go wrong, can't it? At 14, and it's going to affect the next, decades of his life in that way. But he doesn't have that foresight, and why should he? He's 14. So the children in our care, we've got to have that foresight for them that we can't wait around, and they need us to be urgent around this stuff. And to go back to what you said around, could you, I said about, and I was cautious around my words about this idea of like evolution, not revolution, because we need to, not just, be big bang in a school and have it not sustainable. But at the same time, like we've got to be short term as well as like medium term in terms of school improvement, because children can't wait for us to, take the next 7 years to make their school better, because they'll be like 22, 23 years old, and it'll be too late for them at that point in some ways.
Evolution, not, what'd you say?
So I said evolution, not revolution, but you know what? I think some people would disagree with that, and it goes a little bit counter to this idea of pace.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to somewhat do both at the same time without wanting to sit on the fence. Like children that you work with are year 10s and 11s now, you and your team, like they need us now. But there's also things, and I've got 2 senior leaders that basically their remit is to make sure these kids get the best results that they can. And that's important in terms of that investment. But I've also got leaders and people who work within our trust that are looking to make sure that year 7 and 8 have got brilliant attendance habits. Their attendance is above national, whatever it might be, so that we can like bring that through. And you got to think, you got to work, think fast and slow in that way, as much as we want to have the pace going through it.
Okay. If you could have a magic wand and change one thing in education, what is that one thing?
Like my brain straight away, halfway through your question, was going funding. But that's
the most common answer we get.
Yeah. And pause. Go on.
Sir Paul Tarn then says there's not a funding issue in education.
Yeah.
Schools just don't know how, or trusts don't know how to spend it.
Yeah, I get that as well. And, I read someone say recently about this idea that, you can see why schools haven't got money because what they spend their money on, right? And the school in which I'm working at the moment, we've done well this year in that respect. But I think it is that, I got challenged by our CEO a couple of days ago. She said, Tom, we've halved suspensions in our school this year because we believe that ultimately, yes, we need standards, we need expectation, we need those conditions for children to learn, we need not disruption in our classrooms. But if we were working with children that are disadvantaged, we're making them more disadvantaged by suspending them. Children that are permanently excluded from school, whatever it might be, we're not helping them in terms of a sliding doors perspective in terms of their next steps. So we've halved suspensions, and she challenged me to say, what could we do more? If we're making the most vulnerable more vulnerable by suspending, what could we do more? And you know what? I'm still thinking about it a little bit at the moment. But again, you go there in your mind.
So when she asked you that question, and you've been very good today when I've asked you questions, if you don't know the answer, you say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Where some people don't do that, right? What do you do? Do you then go and read? Do you go and ask? Do you go and, how do you answer that question?
Yeah, I think you ask. And I think you, like I said earlier, you do look to good models of schools that have done this well. But schools that have done this well with similar children, I think, and similar circumstances.
Thank you.
Because again, this idea of could you impose one model in one school and take it to another? Somewhat, but not always, I think. Ultimately, trying to find similar schools that have been successful in such ways. And there's great appetite, I think, in our profession at the moment for schools to be more collegiate and more collaborative. Gone are the days where you'd have someone come and visit and you'd say, ultimately, don't tell them anything because it's competitive. I think people realise now these are system-wide challenges that we've got to try and solve together. So what would you do in that way? Yeah, I get what you're saying in terms of funding and being smart with it, but year on year, relatively, schools are having to cut their cloth more strictly because the rise in costs, and you'll get this in your line of work, the rising costs outweigh the funding increase. So as a new head, it's a shock to you, I think, to realise that, hang on, I've got the same staff as I had last year, same amount of children, but rightly, staff are incrementing, staff are earning a bit more the year after, and all of a sudden the funding isn't catching up. So you've got to do more with what you've got before. So I think there is a funding element.
Remove funding, magic wand, what would you change?
We know that if children attend well in our school, they'll do well, okay? So we can do all the work we want to on pedagogy, curriculum, whatever it might be, but the challenge is twofold. One is that if children attend, they do well. And I think that in most schools that would probably be the case. However, the best curriculum really doesn't matter if children are only there 80% of the time. Because how could you read one of these books and miss every fifth chapter if you're only there, 4/5 of the time? And how can we change that? Yeah, that's like, there's appetite for that at the moment, but if we can get children attending better, they're safer, their well-being's better, and they're going to be learning more. And I think schools are, that's the biggest challenge facing schools at the moment for me.
I feel like you have a problem at your school now where you can't get rid of the students.
A little bit.
So I left 40 minutes after when I was supposed to leave the other day because Tyrese, one of our speakers and coaches, was playing basketball. You had kids on the field playing football, and it was busy, like it was lunchtime almost.
Yeah, at 3 o'clock.
But it was 3:20. It was like 20 minutes after, and but I loved it. I think I don't know if it's good from a teacher's perspective, but to me, they want to be here.
Yeah, because
and they're safe.
Yeah, and we get that across, we win that, you know what, we can teach you geography, history. And I think that's the conditions, as I said earlier about, thinking fast and slow. From a slow perspective, we're having a conversation at the moment about the experience of year 7 when they come to us. Do we need to get them into homework straight away from September the 1st?
Yes.
Perhaps not. Because actually we get them to really enjoy being in school. We get their habits really strong in terms of like showing up every day, and that's what we expect because that's what we do around here. We can come to all this stuff. That idea of culture before curriculum, I think, is really important and really strong. So yeah, we've got kids at the moment who are turning up 7 a.m. To do basketball. We've got kids turning up 7:30 before school starts at 8:30 to come to Breakfast Club. The previous exec head, Mark, who did a phenomenal job in the school, set up a cozy club. The idea being that kids basically stay after school to be fed. The more we can make it normalised for them to want to be there, I think we can come to the learning side of it, and we've got teachers that will do that for us.
After school year 11 intervention and stuff like that.
It all comes, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's amazing. Tom, I really enjoyed this conversation. One thing I've always wanted to do with the school podcast is, of course, just add as much value as we possibly can. And I think even for myself delivering these podcasts, I'm kind of starting to learn the direction I want to take it. And I really appreciate your time today. I've learned a lot, and I think people at home will, but also it's great to see that you're also very open-minded. It's not like it's this way and that's it and this is how we do things. It's more of a like, let's chuck ideas into a hat and let's work it out. And even members of your staff, the staff who look after me, obviously I crack jokes, we all get on really well. I said, Tom's on my back again. And then our main contact, like his patience and the way he can break down a situation, articulate it, communicate a lot is unbelievable. And yeah, I think that's amazing to hear. And I think you're just doing great jobs, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you go next. If there is a next, I don't know, you might be like, I might just...
Yeah, let's see. I was chatting to your colleague earlier, and it's that idea of like, almost like just be doing the best job you can in the space that you're in, and then we see where we go from there, don't we?
Amazing. There you have it, guys. Another episode of the School Podcast. I will link all Tom's information below, LinkedIn and things like that if he wants. But I really enjoyed this. So do all the good stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you to our sponsors again, NIS iLearning. They've been smashing it for the last 30 years. And I'm a big believer in their online school. Anyway, until next time.